Hello dear crypto friends, and welcome to today's video in which we are going to try to understand what Bitcoin and the crypto market will be doing in the coming weeks. Can we figure out if this thing will go lower and drag the whole altcoins with it down? Or is Bitcoin just fooling us again and in reality is preparing for an unexpected bull move? So let us try to understand what Bitcoin is doing, and as always, the starting point is the long-term weekly chart, the weekly logarithmic regression band, which we always use to model Bitcoin's long-term behavior. As we can see, this long-term band has been respected throughout Bitcoin's history, and I think it is the best model we currently have to fit Bitcoin's long-term behavior and to make any meaningful predictions for the future. Now, if we zoom in to the weekly chart, we see that Bitcoin has done this quite bizarre structure which many people cannot interpret and which makes many people wonder what the hell Bitcoin is actually doing. Now, I have on this channel already quite a few times uttered the theory that this could have been an expanded flat correction. And so in our example, this would mean that this structure here has been a 4-wave Elliott move, right? And that we are actually preparing for wave 5. And here we had an ABC correction. And here we had an ABC correction, but here we said we have a 5-wave correction, right? And this correction here is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the theory in Elliott wave theory, that this whole structure here is actually just an expanded flat, but it's so prolonged and so stretched out that it feels to us like a bear market. And why do I still, even though Bitcoin has now for basically a year now been in a bear market like structure, why do I still maintain a bullish stance? Am I completely crazy? Well, yes, okay, but that is not the point here. The point is that I think it's good to be bullish when everyone is bearish, and it's good to be bearish when everyone is bullish. So that is the mantra here, because from my experience, there are only two fundamental truths that we can say about Bitcoin, namely that long term the price will be higher than now. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we know that the price will be much higher than it is now. And second, that Bitcoin always does the unexpected. Bitcoin, and hence the entire crypto market, always likes to surprise everyone. So the moment we think we have figured out Bitcoin and everybody starts to think a certain way, that is exactly the time when Bitcoin starts doing the exact opposite. So what do I mean by that? By that I mean, for example, that everybody was super bullish here in the run-up phase in late 2020, early 2021, and everybody was expecting that we go over 100K. And that we get this kind of blow off top pattern. Everybody was expecting that. And what does Bitcoin do? It just stops before that. It just stops at around 60 something K and wobbles around and goes sideways, and then it goes another time to over 60K and does bizarre stuff that nobody was expecting. And when everybody was super bullish, this was actually the time to become bearish. And now we are actually exactly in this scenario here, but on the opposite side. So instead of everyone being super bullish, everyone is extremely bearish. And exactly as in the case when everyone was calling for 100K, everyone is now calling for 10K, 15K, 5K. The lowest, insane, most lows that you have ever heard of are now circulating around, because now everybody is talking about the bear market. And the same way here, we should have become already quite bearish when everyone was super bullish. The same way we should be more bullish when everyone now is extremely bearish. And in the last weeks, I have presented a few compelling arguments for why we are actually seeing some pretty bullish things going on behind the appearance of a brutal bear market. Because remember, when everybody is starting to talk about bear market, that is actually the time when the bear market is already over. This is quite hilarious, but this was also the case here in late 2018, early 2019. The moment when everybody realized that we are indeed in a bear market was already the time when the bear market was over and we were starting to rise again. Same is true for 2014, 2015. By the time everybody was acknowledging, yes, okay, we are indeed in a bear market. It looks really bad for Bitcoin now. That was the time when Bitcoin very shortly afterwards would start rising and go on a massive bull run. So you see, this is the psychology. This is the contrarian philosophy of my thinking. Okay, that is my line of thinking. I'm trying to find out what are most people thinking and then applying the opposite. And if we look at the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, it is insanely low. And last week we had an extreme fear factor of 8, which is one of the lowest it has ever been in the history of the Fear and Greed Index. We can see really that the Fear and Greed Index is being insanely low all the time, which was the last time the case in the March 2020 low. Going back to the weekly chart, let us look at the moving average 200 weeks, because this always provided solid support in Bitcoin's history. Now, I'm not saying that we cannot go to lower prices. That is clear, right? We cannot say anything with certainty in Bitcoin. There are compelling arguments why we might actually touch the moving average 200, because first of all, it's not really far away anymore. It rests at 22,000 and we are now at 29,000, and the low was at about 25,400. So it's not unrealistic to think that we will revisit the MA 200. And for example, you could bring the argument that every time when Bitcoin went under the moving average of 100 weeks, here the green line, that was when we visited the moving average of 200 weeks. This happened here in 2014. This happened in 2018. We visited the moving average 200 after dipping below the MA 100. And so the argument that this happens again now, because we clearly have gone below the MA 100, is quite compelling, that now we revisit the MA 200 again, stay around the MA 200 for a while, and only then afterwards can we resume with the bull market. That is a compelling argument and it makes sense. Or you could also bring the argument that if we look at the monthly RSI, you could say, okay, this is making cycles in the RSI, right? And it appears that we still have not reached the midway point here. So this could also still go lower, and also the monthly RSI both times in the last bear markets was actually lower than it is now. So we could still drop a bit more, which would also speak for the argument that we are actually going lower. Then of course you can look at many on-chain metrics, right? You can look at on-chain metrics. Here's a good site, look into Bitcoin. For example, you can look at the Pi cycle top indicator, and these are two lines that always crossed at exactly the point where there was the top in the bull market, and this happened also here. And every time afterwards we got a bear market where you see that the two lines diverge. Or for example, you look at the MBR VZ score, another interesting indicator, and you see, every time in the bear markets we went into this green band here in the lows, and this time we have not yet touched the green band. So it is quite possible or quite likely that we will touch the green band again. But of course, you can also find an equal amount of on-chain indicators that present you a bullish case. That is the funny and beautiful thing about Bitcoin. You can load up the 1 year hodl wave, and you see that the percentage of coins that are being held for 1 year and longer is rising. And every time this was rising, this actually presented the time when we had hit the bottom. So every time there was a steep rise and it started to flatten, that was the time of the low. For example, here in early 2015, and it again happened in late 2018, and it again happened here in early 2020. So this one here presents a bullish picture. Or the net unrealized profit loss, NUPL, also tells us that it's quite likely that we will get into the capitulation band, which is here given by this green band, and we have not yet visited the green band. So this one would also indicate a bearish case. Or the R hodl ratio would also indicate that we could dip in the green band here and that we might not be done yet. But then again, you see that the lows are rising and rising every time. So it could be that this actually has been the low. So you see, it's quite hilarious. You can find indicators that will confirm your bullish picture, but also you can find indicators that will confirm your bearish picture. So that is the beautiful thing about those on-chain metrics. You can always find one indicator that will confirm your view. But even though it is quite likely that we could revisit the MA 200, I still remain bullish. Why is that? How can I be bullish in this insane scenario where everybody is bearish, where the Fed is tightening, where the interest rates are rising? What is wrong with me? So besides the argument I brought before that I'm a contrarian, so I always try to look at what most people are thinking and then I take the exact opposite, I presented a few arguments for why I think that Bitcoin is actually ripe for an unexpected pump, and that from here we will reverse very soon and go into a wave 5 that will bring us to about 150k or possibly with any luck 200k. Now, one thing of course that we all know is the insane drop of the dollar. The dollar index has seen a massive rally, and we have looked many times at the dollar index and found that it is massively anti-correlated to Bitcoin, and this is very visible on large time scales. So every time when the dollar index was dumping, Bitcoin had a top, and when the dollar index was rising, Bitcoin was in a bear market, and then the dollar index was falling and Bitcoin makes a top, and now the dollar index has a top and Bitcoin is falling. But as we see now here, the dollar index has just started dumping massively, and it was my theory quite a few weeks ago already that at some point the dollar index would start dumping massively, and this would actually be the time when Bitcoin would reverse and start an uptrend. Now, Bitcoin is still not rising, but we should remember that the last time when the dollar index started dumping, Bitcoin was not immediately pumping like crazy. So the dollar index was already falling, and Bitcoin was mostly going sideways. And then after some point, Bitcoin started going up massively. So it might very well be that the dollar index will fall for a while until Bitcoin, now going sideways, or maybe even touching below the previous low of 25k for a very brief moment in time, but then will reverse and we get a brutal pump. And what we can also beautifully see is that the euro is positively correlated to Bitcoin, and that every time the euro has a top, Bitcoin also makes tops. And when the euro has a bear market, Bitcoin is also in the bear market, and euro makes a top, Bitcoin makes a top, euro makes a top, Bitcoin makes a top. So now the euro is rallying, as we can see, massively, and we had this very famous bottom structure, and the structure in the euro looks incredibly similar to the structure that Bitcoin did back in 2015 when we had this double peak structure, one last drop down, and then we went into a rally, double peak structure, one last shake out, and then we go into a rally. And when we compare the euro structure to what the altcoin market cap did back in 2019, we see exactly the same structure again. Double peak, one last shakeout, off into a new rally, one last shakeout, off into a new rally. Then we found this incredible correlation of Bitcoin to the Nasdaq, which I don't want to present again because we have seen it so many times, and in the last video I really spoke in detail about it. But what is important now is that the Nasdaq in turn is very much correlated to American bond yields. And we see that American 10-year bond yields are in this descending channel, and that every time when the bond yields see a peak and then start dropping, that the stock market follows, drops, but then actually goes on a massive run. And most famously, when the yields reached their peak, that was actually the time when the Nasdaq started for its last push, because the peak was reached when the bond yields already started going down. And you can check it, this happened time and time again throughout the Nasdaq's history, most famously of course in the March 2020 low, when we had a peak in the yields, and as soon as it started dropping down, we saw a massive run in the Nasdaq. And guess what is happening now? That is right, friends. Look at the yields. Look at what they are doing. Let me load the candles. Let me load the candles for the yields. They are rolling over and starting to drop nicely. And what does that mean? That means that yes, the Nasdaq might follow a bit more, but as soon as the yields start dropping off even more, bam, that is when the Nasdaq starts going into a massive run. So taking all these things together, the Euro USD that starts to pump now, the dollar index that starts to dump now, which is anti-correlated to Bitcoin, the 10-year US bond yields that start to dump now, which will soon result in a pump in the Nasdaq, the positive correlation of the Nasdaq with Bitcoin, which means that the Nasdaq will drag Bitcoin up once it starts pumping. And the sentiment, which is at all-time lows, the fear index says we are at the lowest lows of possible sentiment and everybody is talking about the bear market. All these things lead me to believe that the likelihood for Bitcoin and the crypto market to go into an unexpected rally into wave 5 that will lead us to Bitcoin prices of $150,000 and even possibly $200,000. So for me, this likelihood is higher than the scenario that we drop down to the moving average of 300 weeks, wobble around for quite a long time on the MA200, and then only in 2023 or 2024 go into a bull run. And coming back one last time to the Nasdaq, because as I said, Bitcoin is highly positively correlated to the Nasdaq and is currently being treated like a tech stock. See my last video where I explain why that is and how far they are actually correlated. I don't see us go down here directly like we did back in the 2000 dot-com bubble. I don't see this happening. And a very strong argument for that is that the Nasdaq is actually printing a gigantic hidden bullish divergence. Just look at this here. This is an insanely incredible hidden bullish divergence where we make higher lows in the price but lower lows in the RSI. And if we go back, this is actually exactly what happened all the way in the Nasdaq from May 1995 until September 1998. We had this period here where we were dumping multiple times, time and time again, and then we printed this massive hidden bullish divergence, and then suddenly we went into the final run of this rally. And zooming in, the Nasdaq actually corrected 28.42% the last time before it started massively taking off into the final phase of the bull run. So an almost 30% correction at the very end of this multi-year long hidden bullish divergence structure. And the same thing, believe it or not, but the same thing is happening again. We have a multi-year hidden bullish divergence and we have higher lows in the price, and we are already with the RSI on the support line of this multi-year trend. So I think the probability for me is very high that suddenly the Nasdaq will reverse and go into an unexpected bull run, which nobody is expecting. But as we saw, quite a few indicators are pointing towards it. Now even this thing with a multi-year hidden bullish divergence in the long-term RSI, there are just so many things pointing towards an unexpected bull run, both in the Nasdaq and in crypto, that I cannot just ignore it. But I will say this, of course, there's the probability that I'm wrong with this theory and that yes, indeed, we are just simply dropping like a stone and we are getting another dot-com bubble, and that Bitcoin will be dragged down and might even hit the weekly moving average 300 weeks and stay down here and then be in a prolonged bear market and then start the next rally only as late as 2023 or possibly even as late as early 2024. This is of course still possible, friends. It is clear I might be wrong. I'm putting out this bullish theory here in a time when everybody else is bearish, exactly for the reason that everybody else is bearish. And that is my risk that I'm taking, that I might end up looking like a complete idiot. That is the danger of having a YouTube crypto channel. You might always end up looking like a complete idiot and that your theory was wrong. But I prefer being contrarian, meaning being on the opposite side of what most people are thinking. Oh, and I would like to add something to the theory about the Bitfinex shorts. And from this here, from the longs on Bitfinex, I actually have a real problem seeing any meaningful indicators for Bitcoin's behavior, because here, for example, the longs suddenly spiked, but this was actually here in the low, and then actually we rose afterwards. And then here the long spiked again, and then we rose again. and then here the longs suddenly spiked and then we went up again. So I don't really see that the longs are a very strong indicator that we are going to dump. In fact, look at this here. This is the most hilarious one. So the longs reach a super insane peak here at the low, and then we go onto a massive bull run. So if anything, it seems to me that the longs on Bitfinex actually seem to be pointing more towards that we are going to pump, crazy but true. And also we shouldn't forget that the volume of Bitfinex is hilariously low. I mean, we are looking at an exchange here that is on place 14 of all exchanges with regards to volume of Bitcoin. So we are at 92 million volume, whereas Binance has 1.8 billion, FTX 700 something million. Then Binance, BTC, BUSD has over 700 million, Coinbase 570 million, and we are looking at Bitfinex with 92 million. So in my opinion, the Bitfinex longs do not have a whole lot of weight. And if we look at the historical behavior of the Bitfinex longs, here for example, they were rising all the time, and this actually led to a bull run to 69k. So I'm not so sure if we can really say that the Bitfinex longs will lead to a dump. But friends, I will always say this: never exclude this possibility, because Bitcoin can always surprise us. And I cannot fully exclude, of course, that Bitcoin will dump down now to the lower end of this long-term trend channel. I cannot exclude it. I cannot give any guarantees. That is only my opinion, and nobody can foresee the future. But as I said, all these things make me more bullish rather than not. And I still expect a sudden and bizarre rally that no one is expecting. And that is why I will remain with my theory here that we will get a wave 5 push up to above 100k, possibly as high as 150 or 200k, when nobody is thinking that such a thing is possible. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did find it interesting, if you think it contains some useful information, please leave a like. And of course, I would be happy if you would subscribe, and welcome you in this small illustrious club of crypto enthusiasts, because I'm making daily update videos on crypto, on Bitcoin, on all altcoins. I'm looking at Ethereum, I'm analyzing XRP, I'm analyzing even Cardano and all other altcoins. I will keep making daily videos, and it would be fun if we could go on this journey together. Then I would say have a nice day and see you in the next video. Bye!